With Alien Romulus now in theaters, it sparked renewed interest in the Alien franchise, bringing attention back to where it all started, Ridley Scott's Alien from 1979. The 79 theatrical cut has been on my radar for years, and as a huge fan of Oscar-winning costume designer John Mollo, who crafted iconic looks for Star Wars and The Empire Strikes Back, I felt compelled to dive into the grittier costumes featured in Alien. Though the film has a small ensemble cast and relatively few costumes, the level of detail is astounding, making this review quite intricate. When researching older films, like my experience with Sleepy Hollow, I often encounter challenges. Given that Alien recently celebrated its 45th anniversary in May, and with many of the cast and crew no longer with us, I expected the research process to be difficult. However, I found the opposite to be true because this franchise is so beloved, there's a wealth of information available. I even watched 3 documentaries on the making of Alien. One thing that stood out is how much of a collaborative effort it took to bring Alien to life. While John Mollo was the costume designer, many others were involved in bringing the creation of Alien to the big screen. Now, unfortunately, there was some infighting and hurt feelings along the way, but with any great piece of art, and I consider Alien to be one of the greatest horror classics, sacrifice is inevitable. I should point out that I don't include John Mollo in any of this conflict. Any interview I've read where he's quoted, he's always generous and respectful. Now that said, I doubt a film like Alien could be made today, at least not with the same practical effects and craftsmanship that made the original so special. Now I won't dive too deeply into the creative process beyond the costumes, as there's already a wealth of information available. And fair warning, there will be spoilers in this video, so if you haven't seen the movie, or it's been a while, I highly recommend watching it first before continuing. Now, to help you follow along, since this is a detailed, nerdy deep dive, I've created chapters so you can skip ahead at any time. Design. I have a solid timeline of when French artist and cartoonist Moebius and Swiss artist H.R. Giger became involved in Alien. If you've seen my review of The Fifth Element, you may be familiar with this, but for those who aren't, here's a quick overview. Alien screenwriter Dan O'Bannon brought in Giger to design the alien creature and other concepts, and Moebius to create visuals that would help sell the script. This is similar to what George Lucas did when he commissioned American concept designer and illustrator Ralph McQuarrie while drafting Star Wars. McQuarrie's illustrations and paintings depicted characters and scenes from Lucas's vision, which were then submitted to the studio alongside the script. Moebius didn't stay on the project for long, however, as there was a misunderstanding about his pay. He thought it was $5,000 per week, but it turned out to be just $500. Meanwhile, the studio wasn't immediately receptive to Giger's work, but director Ridley Scott sided with O'Bannon after seeing Giger's illustrated book, Necronomicon.
And has Alien turned out as you imagined?
Yeah, I mean, you always aim for the alien or the film? The alien.
The monster.
The monster. We shouldn't call him a monster, he's better than that. So I think that's the first answer, that he's better than a monster.
Giger drew inspiration from this book for his designs, including the derelict alien spacecraft, the space jockey, and the xenomorph creature. Ultimately, the film's costumes were designed by John Mollo, while the practical alien costume was created by Giger. Now, to keep this video at a reasonable length, I won't delve into the creation of the xenomorph costume and props here, as there's already a lot of information available on the subject. However, I may revisit it in a future video. John Mollo. Like many of the original Star Wars team, John Mollo transitioned to work on Alien. Mollo had a lifelong interest in European and American military uniforms, which led him to write several books on the subject, some of which I came across during my time in theater. Mollo's father was a collector of tin soldiers and military insignia, and a skilled illustrator. In fact, some of his drawings are now part of the collection at the Victoria and Albert Museum in London. Mollo's fascination with military attire eventually paved the way for his career in costume design, starting as an advisor for the 1966 film Charge of the Light Brigade, and later moving into official design roles. Speaking of his first design job for Star Wars, Mollo said, "I had just finished working as a historical military advisor on Stanley Kubrick's Barry Lyndon when Milena Canonero asked whether I'd be interested in working on an untitled new science fiction film. Since I'd just finished the work for Kubrick, I thought I'd investigate further and met George Lucas. Over Christmas of 1975. Of course, the rest is movie history. Over the years, many of the costumes from Alien have surfaced at auctions, so I'll highlight some of those items as we move through this discussion. Now let's dive deeper into the costume, shall we? Hypersleep Chambers. Alien opens with a long, silent shot before revealing the 7 crew members waking from hypersleep in their pods. The 6 visible crew members are dressed in white shorts, a sort of adult diaper. In a behind-the-scenes photo, it's revealed that Ripley and Lambert also wear white tape across their breasts. According to IMDb, the crew was initially supposed to emerge from hypersleep completely naked, as shown in Ridley Scott's original storyboards. However, this idea was scrapped due to the concerns about censorship in various markets. It's also worth noting that aside from some special effects like blood and sweat, the 2 female characters wear no makeup. A fun fact is early in the shooting, Ridley actress Sigourney Weaver thought she was allergic to the cats. 4 look-alike cats were hired to play Jonesy. But it turned out she was allergic to the combination of the glycerin they used to imitate sweat and the cat hair combined. So they stopped using the glycerin and the problem was solved. Speaking of sweat, a subtle clue that Ash is a synthetic human early in the movie is that he never sweats, unlike the rest of the crew. Now, after waking, Kane grabs a white robe with pink bias trim, which he, Ripley, and Brett wear during the breakfast scene shortly afterward. Kane later wears the same robe when he wakes in the infirmary, and Ripley adds this robe, presumably found on the Narcissus, before re-entering hypersleep. In the spring of 2024, actor John Hurt's off-white cotton and silk robe was put up for auction by Prop Store, though it didn't sell. The robe features a loose cinching belt and a distinctive pink stripe on its flap collar. USCSS Nostromo crew uniforms. Given John Mollo's background, he likely felt right at home designing the crew uniforms for the Nostromo crew. While the initial concepts were created by Moebius, it seems Mollo took a different approach based on his sketches. His costume plot and measurement sheets, auctioned by Prop Store, along with some of his sketches, offer rare insight into the design process. These old-school documents, written in pencil, reveal that each cast member had multiple uniforms, with Ripley and Ash having the most. Interestingly, they also showed British actor John Finch, who was originally cast but had to drop out due to illness on the first day of filming, and then John Hurt was cast in his place. Now, the standard Nostromo crew uniform consisted of a buttercream short-sleeved shirt with pink piping, patch pockets and epaulettes paired with matching cream cargo pants with multiple pockets, a crew belt, a short-sleeved khaki shirt, and a long-sleeve Henley-style shirt. These combinations can be seen throughout the film with some variations. The look was completed with high-top running shoes, customized PF flyers. In the 70s, they became the devoted shoe brand of NASA's Gemini 2 team. In the original sketches, the shirts included name tags, but in the final edit, these tags were removed, leaving an open slot. The well-worn space trucker aesthetic was emphasized by the costumes being washed and dried without pressing, giving them a broken-in, lived-in look. Of this, Mollo said, "Because Ridley wanted everything to look well-worn and lived in, we washed, scraped, and even sandpapered the costumes many times before they were ever worn." Over the years, many pieces from the Alien crew costumes have been auctioned. Labels suggest that the uniforms were made by the London-based costume supplier Bermans and Nathans, which was acquired by Angels Costumes in 1992. Mollo had many of the Star Wars costumes tailored there as well. Actor Harry Dean Stanton's character, Brett, had almost his entire costume, including his crew shirt, Nostromo jacket, cargo pants, and his death scene hat with production patch, put up for auction. Notably, Brett's pants are blue, which may indicate they were a backup pair, as the rest of the crew's pants were cream. Interestingly, Chevy Chase wore a version of Brett's cap in Fletch 1985. While Mollo's notes indicated that both Dallas and Brett were supposed to wear crew caps, only Brett appears wearing one in the final film. Now, Mollo's chart also shows that Parker was supposed to wear a brown leather flight jacket, titled Overjacket Type 1, while Brett was to wear a nylon jacket titled Overjacket Type 2. However, it appears that Ridley Scott requested that all the crew wear the nylon jackets as seen in the film. Parker's Nostromo leather flight jacket was auctioned by Heritage Auction and sold for $15,600 on July 28, 2013, while Brett's screen match jacket was sold by Movie Prop Place for an undisclosed amount. If you've made it this far, thank you so much for staying with me. If you enjoy this type of content, consider subscribing to my channel. Creating video essays and deep dives like this involves a lot of research, and unlike other channels, it's just me and my editor, Justin. So if you'd like to support my work in a more meaningful way, please join my Patreon. Members get perks like early access to my videos, input on future topics, and a monthly members-only live stream. I'll leave a link in my profile below if you're interested in checking it out. Now back to my alien analysis. In 2014, Heritage Auction sold a screen-used quilted brown Ripley jacket for $15,600. However, there's no evidence that this jacket was worn during the theatrical release of Alien, despite the auction house claiming it was worn when Ripley is on the lower deck with Parker and Brett. In reality, Ripley is seen in her iconic jumpsuit during that scene. Now, it's possible the jacket appeared in the 2003 director's cut. Meanwhile, a Nostromo crew jacket, prototype designed for a woman, sold at Prop Store in 2021 for almost $12,000. The main difference between this prototype and the jackets worn by Kane and Dallas in the film is the absence of crisscross lacing on the sleeves, a design element featured in many of the Alien costumes. Lambert, on the other hand, wears a vest-style version of the Nostromo jacket earlier in the film over two layered t-shirts. Later, she switches to a collarless jacket. So a prototype of a similar jacket went up for auction by Prop Store this summer. Based on its collarless snap-front design, I suspect this prototype was originally meant for Lambert, though her screen-worn jacket appears to be longer with full-length sleeves. Ash stands out from the rest of the crew, being the only non-human on board. He wears blue, which I suspect represents the science division, a color that Mollo consistently used for that role. Interestingly, Brett also wears blue pants with his tropical shirt, creating a slight deviation from the uniform standard. One notable omission from Mollo's costume plot is the flight suits worn by Ripley and Ash. Ripley alternates between wearing hers fully zipped and tying it around her waist. Both her stunt doubles and Ash's flight suits were auctioned by Prop Store, but Ripley's actual suit, described as a long-sleeve olive drab nylon canvas flight suit, failed to sell in 2022 at Heritage Auctions. It could potentially come up for auction again in the future. To give the characters individuality, many of them wear personal accessories. We've already mentioned Brett's tropical shirt, but there's also Lambert's cowboy boots, Parker's blue headband, and Ripley's black Casio F100 watch as examples. Now, as far as the watch goes, an almost fully disintegrated screen-worn version of Ripley's watch fetched an impressive $8,750 at auction. According to Silodrome, Ripley wore two Casio F100s in the film, stacked top to tail on the same strap, with the prop department adding a red plastic backing plate to create a single cohesive piece. Casio then reissued a modern version of this legendary watch in 2023. In the 1999 documentary The Alien Legacy, Mollo shared that Ridley Scott likely conceived the ancient Egyptian wings logo for Weyland-Yutani. The name and logo, designed by Ron Cobb, were initially considered together, but over time the words were dropped, leaving only the wings. Mollo said, "Ridley is a great stickler for detail, so we had a rubber Weyland-Yutani stamp made and went about madly labeling everything." The color of the crew's wings varied. According to Mollo's original concept plot, Dallas, the Nostromo captain, wore gold wings, while the warrant, executive, and science officers, navigator, and chief engineer wore silver wings. Brett, the engineering technician, wore red wings. However, in the film, the crew's shirts feature blue wings, except for Dallas, who wears gold, and Kane, who wears silver. A smaller black and tan version of the wings can also be seen on their jackets and coveralls. Mollo said, "I came up with the Nostromo patch and all the various little badges for the different departments, engineering, science, and so forth. The various department collar badges, flight crew on Dallas, Kane and Ripley, navigator on Lambert, science on Ash, and engineer on Parker and Brett are seen throughout the movie. While Mollo intended them on the collar, like we see on the company man Ash, the others placed them on the front of their shirts, jackets, or flight suits." Mollo originally designed flight deck helmets for the crew, but the final design kept things simpler, opting for headsets instead. But you can still see a version of Mollo's original design behind Ridley and Dallas. All crew shirts, flight suits, and jackets feature the rainbow embroidered Nostromo patch designed by Mollo, prominently displayed on the upper sleeves and on the front of Brett's hat. Additionally, the crew's nationalities are distinguished by triangular patches that display variations of their country's flag, as the story is set 143 years in the future. For instance, Brett's jacket bears a patch commemorating the United States' 300th anniversary. USCSS Nostromo spacesuits. While the crew uniforms dominate the costumes in Alien, the spacesuits worn by Captain Dallas, Executive Officer Kane, and Navigator Lambert play a pivotal role when they investigate the derelict spacecraft after the Nostromo lands on the planetoid. In a 1999 interview, John Mollo recalled that Ridley Scott had provided numerous photocopies of Moebius's work, which had greatly inspired him. During an initial briefing, they discussed the design direction, with Scott expressing his desire for the spacesuits to have a Japanese-inspired, samurai-like aesthetic. He wanted the suits to be both practical and visually striking, with a worn, used appearance. And then he also introduced the idea that the exterior spacesuits should be color-coded for each individual. Ridley Scott explained to Fantastic Films, "The Japanese armor came out of my desire to make things look otherworldly. The owners of the Nostromo are Japanese. Moebius's design brought a heavy, bulky look to the suits, which he had already explored in his earlier comic book work. Ultimately, Kane wore yellow, Dallas wore a pinkish red, and Lambert wore blue. However, these spacesuits were far from comfortable. According to IMDb, they were huge, bulky items lined with nylon and had no outlets for breath or condensation. Working under the hot studio lights, which often exceeded 100 degrees Fahrenheit, the actors frequently passed out from the heat. A nurse had to be on set constantly to provide them with oxygen. Even Scott's and cinematographer Derek Valent's children, used for long shots in the suits, passed out, prompting the modifications to the costumes. Mollo recalled the challenges, saying, "When the actor can't stand being in the suit anymore, you have to undo all these pipes and take the helmet off, and the whole thing becomes quite complicated." All three of these costumes have come up for auction, but Kane's suit is the jewel in the Propstar spacecraft collection, matching the one worn whilst Kane is walking through the derelict spacecraft and in amongst the facehugger eggs. According to Propstar, a different suit, with a slightly different configuration, can be seen hanging up in the ship later on in the film. Propstar states that the costume remains in its original film use condition, except the backpack, the wrist guards, and the Kane name badge on the chest, which have all been replaced with painstakingly accurate replicas sourced from the original reference. In the documentary, Mollo describes Kane's spacesuit, saying, "This is a yellow suit, one of different colors, with bits of piping, a sort of Japanese cording on it, and a bogus readout of some sort on the wrists." In Star Wars, these things were known as greeblies, which I think is still used in science fiction. "These are the spacesuit pants," Mollo says. "Nothing very special about them, though there's a patch on the back, which is a stylized Union Jack. They all had different national badges, or at least there were American and British ones." Now, I'll note that the badge on Kane's backpack, as part of the Propstar spacesuit collection, is inaccurate, as it features the American flag when it should actually be the UK flag. According to Mollo, the helmet, made of fiberglass with a bronze finish, is a particularly heavy item. He adds that there are 2 holes in the front intended for air pipes, although they weren't practical, and a functional light on top. Inside, there are visible bits of wiring. The boots, meanwhile, are store-bought with bits of plastic and webbing stuck on them. Mollo adds that boots are always a problem, sometimes the least satisfactory part of the spacesuit, but fortunately, they aren't seen all that much, so we just get away with what we can. Narcissus Shuttle Emergency Spacesuits. Now, before wrapping up this video, I want to highlight a few more costumes. First, we have the Shuttle Emergency Spacesuit seen behind Ripley on the Narcissus. Although technically a prop or set decoration, since it was never worn by any of the characters, it's still a fascinating piece. This spacesuit went up for auction on October 12, 2018, and sold for £8,610. According to Prop Store, it's a 1960s high-altitude pressure suit. Made from thin white fabric, it was modified with additional components to give it a more futuristic look. The suit also features a plastic helmet with various metal components and a clear acrylic visor, while the gloves closely resemble those worn with the Nostromo spacesuits. However, the true standout is Ripley's iconic white Narcissus spacesuit, which she wears during the climactic scene. When Ripley realizes the xenomorph is aboard the shuttle, she quickly dons the spacesuit before harpooning the creature and blowing it out of the airlock. Like her white tank top and bikini briefs, the white quilted spacesuit starkly contrasts with the inky black, wet appearance of the xenomorph. This incredible costume also went up for auction in 2018. Heritage Auction describes it as a heavy ivory canvas paneled quilted jumpsuit with padded pockets, white netting, webbing straps, lace-up embellishments throughout, a zipper back closure, triangular patch on the left shoulder, and cast resin environmental regulators on the wrists. And then the helmet is actually a repainted landing party helmet, like those worn by Kane, Dallas, and Lambert. On a recent rewatch of Alien, I noticed that the microchip textures along the helmet's exterior almost resemble Egyptian hieroglyphs, a detail I hadn't noticed on the landing party helmets, but the white repaint on Ripley's helmet really makes it stand out. Ripley's spacesuit ended up selling for an astounding $192,000, more than all of the other Alien costume auction items combined. Let me know in the comments your favorite Alien costume. For more Alien content, be sure to check out my interview with the Alien Romulus costume design team, including Emmy Award-winning costume designer Carlos Rosario. I'll leave a link in the pinned comment below. Thank you for spending time with me. I'll see you in the next video.